Welcome to the last segment of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Tuesday, May 26th in the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC. Our guest in this segment is Will Smith, and we're going to be talking about two things, and we're going to start by talking about rule by whim.
Yes, well, it's ruled by, it's not democracy. I'm just going to tell this quick story about my last trip to the U.S., because I'm a U.S. citizen, I have a U.S. passport. But my passport expired while I was there, and I had checked this out before I left Canada. So I have a permanent resident card, so I have good Canadian ID, and I checked with the immigration here, and they said, you don't need your U.S. passport, you're a Canadian resident, so this is our government's issued ID. We don't care about your U.S. passport.
So all you need to get back into Canada...
All I need to get back into Canada is my PR card.
Okay.
And in the United States, I asked immigration, my passport's going to expire on this trip, so when I leave the United States, is there any problem with me leaving the United States with an expired passport? And the immigration officer said, we don't have any problem with that. There's no law against that. But it doesn't sound very intelligent to me, but you didn't ask me to comment on that. We don't care. You can leave the United States, but you won't be able to get back in. So anyway, so I thought I was pretty much covered. And when I came to the airline to leave, it was very friendly and everything. But then as soon as they saw that my passport expired the previous day, there was a change in body language and change in seriousness about the subject. And she said, well, you can't fly. And I said, well, that doesn't sound right to me because I've already checked all this out. And so, well, it turns out after a long discussion that what's happened is somewhere in the U.S. government, somebody has told these airlines that if someone flies, or if someone flies out of the United States and they're not allowed into the country, then the airline is going to get fined heavily for that problem, because now I'm in limbo.
And they were afraid that if you flew with their airline into Canada, Canada would not let you in. Right.
That's what their story is. Now this person who was taking care of me wasn't quite sure, and so she had to call a supervisor, and the supervisor, it just so happened, had just moved there from Seattle. And so he was familiar with the situation.
Where were you at this time?
I was in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay.
So he said, oh, that's no problem. I mean, that's the story here. But once you get up there, they'll know that that's not a problem, and you can get back into Canada with the card. So he did some
right.
magic on the computer, and I got to fly to Seattle. But the woman had told me if she let me fly and I had a problem, she would get fired. And she was nervous about it. She was noticeably nervous. Yeah, I don't blame her either. So then I get to Seattle, and the same thing. Supervisors are coming out and saying, no, absolutely, you can't get on the plane. So as a result, I had to take a ferry. So I had to spend the night, and I don't know, the whole thing cost me probably an extra $250 or something. But I got to the ferry, and they were, they understood my concern or the concern, I should say. It wasn't my concern. And so what they did was they took a copy of my passport and a copy of my PR card and brought it back to the supervisor. And the supervisor said, you don't need to take the copy of his passport. He's going to get into Canada just fine. And evidently they're very familiar with this. So I just want to observe this. It's a very interesting situation because there's no law against me going to Canada with an expired U.S. passport, and there's no law keeping me from entering. So it's just somebody somewhere has told the airlines or someone that they're not allowed to fly people into a country without a valid passport, but they don't care about you entering by sea. So I just think it's an interesting situation because I didn't break any laws. I wasn't contravening. And then when I got to Canada, I showed my PR card, and the immigration officer didn't even ask for my passport. He just said, welcome back, and he asked me about what the weather was like because he has friends in Apache Junction. So it was a totally different scenario. There's no body language if I've violated some sacred thing. And so I just think that's really interesting.
And the way you described it when we talked about it before was that the U.S. government the lawmakers actually say there's no problem with Will Smith crossing into Canada.
There's no law.
Yeah, but somewhere
Obviously, I did it.
Yeah, somewhere in the regulatory authority, somebody has told the airlines that they can't do it.
I just think it's interesting that we live in a democracy and this kind of thing happens, because it doesn't sound like what happens in a democracy to me. It sounds like somebody decided that this is the rule and issued the rule, and that's it. I don't care. I mean, I'll comply with the rules and everything, and I'll get my passport renewed. But I just think it's a very interesting situation. It's certainly not ruled by law. That's all I'd like to say.
And hopefully, you know, the good thing would be if this situation bounced back up the ladder, and somewhere higher up it was realized that yes, this isn't right, and we're going to change it so that the next person who comes along in the same situation can do what the law says they can do.
Well, we'll see what happens, but it's an interesting situation, and I see, you know, I've talked about this before, that there seems to be a gradual slide away from any kind of individual sovereignty in the Western countries, and there seems to be in other places it's going up. So I think that's another interesting situation to see how that's working out. And then
you wanted to talk about raising consciousness.
Yeah, the other thing I want to talk about is raising consciousness, and I'm just going to. I mean, I've talked on the show about this before, and I'm going to continue to talk about it. And I've got a new job working for a Russian company that is making videos of some of the people who are teaching about this possibility of changing consciousness. And so I'm going to be working. My Russian isn't very good yet. I've only been studying for a couple of years, and I don't have an immersion program. It's just when I can do it myself. But it's interesting work because I have to go back and forth with someone who speaks Russian and English, and create subtitle files and even dub over in some areas. And I have to make videos with pictures that explain this. And it just the basic idea. I mean, if you take the 30,000-foot view of what we're seeing here, is we're going to have a shift. We're all going to experience this shift in consciousness. And to summarize it, I would say that the shift is something like, instead of just having a belief that we have some kind of existence, eternal consciousness, that we have some kind of an eternal consciousness of who we are, that's going to turn into much more of a reality. Like, I know that I have an existence outside my body, like I know I have a right hand. And that's just what I see is happening over there. And the other thing is that that's going to make sense, I think, it's not going to make sense necessarily in how we get there, but the other shift is just that if I do something to you, you're connected to me, that we're all connected together. And our current models of classical physics models are just sort of out the window, because the quantum physics models show us that what we're thinking about, the way we use our current models are no longer valid. Much like, and it takes a while for our consciousness to shift, and we haven't done that shift yet. We've known since the 1920s that our consciousness can affect whether an electromagnetic radiation looks like a particle, like a photon, or looks like a wave. And so we know that this is true, and we know that there's a certain amount of connectivity among all of us, and we know in theory that we create reality by our consciousness. But my job is going to be how to explain that so people really get it, so that people can see that this is so. And it's a little difficult, it's challenging, but it's also really fun.
It's very challenging and very difficult. Yeah.
So I don't know how I'm going to do it exactly yet. I'm still really trying to understand all of this.
What are some of the things he has said and written about?
Okay, well, I'll just give you an example of the thing, and I think I've even said this on the show, that our consciousness is such right now that our whole system is based on the belief that we can solve social problems by killing people. I mean, that is just built into the system. It doesn't matter what level you look at, that is the system. Some people are more equal than other people, and some people just need to be either culled or, something they need to be gotten rid of, and then everything's going to be hunky-dunky. But we know from several thousand years of history that just isn't so. So that's one thing. And then I'd say the The other thing is that, well, this idea that E equals mc squared is really not explaining things very well. What we really need to do is say m equals E over c squared, so that we're constantly, the only thing that really exists is now. And so how do we keep in that moment of now instead of pulling ourselves out of it? And there are all sorts of things in our society and our way of thinking, because we're always save for the future and you know, do this and do that. And so we're going to start looking at reality as not just a consensus, not an average of what's so, but as a discrete model. Where one of my friends, to explain it, says, reality is fired at us point blank at 400,000 frames per second. Now what that means is to somebody who's watching TV, TV comes at you at 60 frames a second. So in each second there's 60 pictures. And in reality, there's more than that going on. So we're going to look at that. How can we see that reality is not what we think it is? And I mean, you know, the easiest, well, we got to stop. So
Got to stop. Well,
anyway,
thank you very much.
It's exciting to work on this.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on the show, Jack.
And looking, who knows what's coming next. Thank you very much for watching today's Citizens Forum, and thank you, Will.